On May 23, 1940, a crippled British Spitfire plummeted through the skies over France. The aircraft was riddled with bullet holes and barely holding together. Inside the cockpit, Squadron Leader Francis White was fighting to keep his plane from becoming a burning coffin. With his engine gasping for power, White managed to guide the shattered aircraft down onto the grass of Calais-Marck Airfield. But stepping out of the cockpit brought a terrifying silence. He was completely alone, deep inside enemy territory, as German forces advanced on his position. White radioed his base in England to report his location and then sprinted for a nearby ditch. Hiding in the mud, he had only one option left: wait and watch the sky. Without his aircraft, White was defenseless. The crash had transformed him from an apex predator into prey, waiting in a muddy trench to be captured or killed. The rescue team sent from across the English Channel arrived in an unlikely vehicle. The primary extraction aircraft was a Miles Master, a slow, bulky trainer plane with no armor and absolutely no weapons. Sending an unarmed trainer into German-controlled airspace was a high-risk gamble. To protect it, 2 Spitfires accompanied the mission, flown by Pilot Officer Alan Deere and his wingman Johnny Allen. As the group reached the airfield, thick clouds masked a German ambush. 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109s suddenly dropped from the sky. The British pilots were now facing a 4-to-1 disadvantage. They had to find a way to survive the swarm while tethered to a slow, defenseless target on the ground. Deere immediately split the defense. He ordered his wingman to intercept the main force high above, staying low to cover the trainer. But lacking a radio, the trainer pilot was blind to the ambush, unaware a German fighter was diving toward him. Seeing the enemy line up a shot on the unaware trainer, Deere shoved his Spitfire into a steep, high-speed dive to intercept. Deere chased the German fighter out over the sea, eventually catching the Messerschmitt in his sights. He unleashed all 8 machine guns, sending the enemy aircraft into the water. It was the first time a Spitfire had successfully destroyed a Bf 109 in combat. It was a historic kill, but it came at a price. While Deere secured the trainer, he had to ignore his wingman's radio calls for help against the swarm above. The lack of a radio in the rescue plane forced him to choose between his friend and the mission. Deere climbed back into the clouds but found no sign of his wingman. Instead, he immediately found himself engaged with 2 more Messerschmitts. He shot down the first, but the remaining German executed a steep dive toward the ground, attempting to exploit a specific mechanical weakness in the Spitfire's design. Early Spitfire engines were prone to fuel starvation during -G maneuvers. If a pilot pushed the nose down too sharply, gravity forced the fuel away from the intake line, which could stall the engine mid-flight. To bypass this hardware limitation, Deere rolled his aircraft upside down. By pursuing in an inverted dive, he used extreme piloting skill to compensate for his engine's engineering flaw. The inverted chase thundered across the French countryside at treetop height, with Deere pushing his aircraft to its physical limits. He engaged the engine's emergency boost, straining the machine to close the gap on the fleeing German pilot. Finally, the enemy fighter drifted into the center of his gun sight. Deere pulled the trigger, but heard no machine guns, just an empty click. He was out of ammunition. Deere was now flying at hundreds of miles per hour directly behind a lethal enemy, but he was completely unarmed. Every mechanical advantage he started with had been stripped away. With his guns empty, Deere decided to bluff. He continued to maneuver aggressively, staying glued to the German's tail as if he were still prepared to fire. The German pilot panicked, dodging wildly to avoid bullets that didn't exist. Even when the German realized the Spitfire wasn't shooting, his nerve was gone. Deere's relentless aggression had shattered his confidence, and the Messerschmitt finally broke away to flee for home. When the physical weapons failed, Deere used audacity as a substitute. He won the dogfight by breaking the enemy's mind instead of his airframe. The bluff worked. White and Leithart escaped in the trainer, and Deere eventually reunited with his wingman, Johnny Allen, over the channel. Both Spitfires were battered, but they were headed home. This encounter provided the first recorded proof that a Spitfire could outmatch the Bf 109 in a dogfight. It was a pivotal moment that helped forge the aircraft's combat legend during the earliest stages of the war. The Spitfire is remembered as a triumph of engineering, But at Calais, that engineering reached its absolute limit. When the radios failed, the engines starved, and the guns ran dry. Survival was dictated by the courage of the pilot.